one of my favorite topics is obviously entrepreneurship. I am always trying to convince people if they have that grind and that grit to be their own boss. This week, I am super excited to welcome Marlina Ramchandran. She is an expert on entrepreneurship, and she is also the Special Projects Manager at YSpace York University. She's responsible for planning and the implementation of corporate partnership projects, including the highly prestigious Visa She's Next 10K grant for women entrepreneurs. And she has also led the national expansion for YSpace's Women Entrepreneur Focus Program, Ella. With over 20 years of experience spread over startup consulting, hospitality, education, and media, Marlina has significant experience in leading high-performance teams to accelerate the growth journey for startups. She has so much experience and wisdom to offer. I promise you, if you've got that entrepreneurship bug, this episode is for you. So let's go. Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to welcome Marlina Ramchandran to the podcast. I've been wanting to have her on. Not only is she a colleague, I also consider her a mentor and a friend. I am so thrilled to welcome her today. She has so much to offer in terms of entrepreneurship and great advice about the world, and you are just going to love this conversation. Of course, we were mentioning before it would have been fabulous if we were doing it over drinks, but that will be another time. So welcome, Marlina. Thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'm so excited and thank you for inviting me today.
Of course. So let's start with the first question I always ask, which is, who are the biggest Maverick inspirations in your life?
That's a very interesting question. And I always feel that it's never really one person who plays that role. I think over the period of different people that we meet, different people have different influences on our life. But if I really have to list out two very specific people, I would definitely want to start with both my parents, my dad and my mom. I think I come from a family where they started off at a very early stage in life with very limited resources. And I grew up seeing the value of hard work, how important it is to be honest, resilience, how do you make sure that within limited resources, how do you make the most of it, and still maintain really solid reputation in the community of people in and around us. So I saw my parents both working towards that, and a combination of all of that, I would say, have learned from them. On the professional front, my second boss that I used to work with, he was the vice president of marketing, and I really got a chance to work with him as a manager when I was pretty young. I was almost like 26 years old, and which is when he entrusted me with a lot of leadership responsibilities. And I think he paved the way for me to learn how to recruit a team, how do you make a team work? How do you actually become a leader that commands respect rather than demanding respect? So, yeah, it's been a combination of people from my personal life and my professional life.
I love it. And I love that you use your parents as an example, because that's so amazing to see your parents and how they've shaped you. And it's fantastic. So let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about where you started. I know you are you're 5, 6 years new to Canada.
2018 was 7, 8 years.
So it was okay, a little bit off, but anyways, let's talk about where you started and how you got to Canada and where you are today and what you're doing.
Again, this can go on for slightly longer. So let me know if I go on for too long, because 20 years in the corporate world is a pretty long time, but I'm going to keep it as much short as possible. So I grew up in India, mostly in the western part, Gujarat, studied in private school there and got access to really good education at a time when everybody else spoke the local language. I got introduced to English at a very early age, which was very instrumental in me building my network and career in the later years. I did my 12th in US in California. My family had immigrated there, so got a chance to understand the academic system there, and then we chose to move back. Back in India, I did my bachelor's in English and then my MBA with marketing. That was a time when private MBA was not very well recognized in the corporate world. So I did have my struggle in really trying to get my foot in the door as far as the corporates is concerned. So ended up in hospitality, worked with hotels, learned different aspects of running hotels. Figured out this is not what something I like to do. So I dabbled with international education. I was briefly in the media business. I also worked in insurance. But long story short, I think for me, while I was working with these big corporates and really good profiles, I think end of the day, I did not find it satisfactory enough. And it was not something which made me want excited every day I woke up in the morning. So one fine day, I get a call from a recruitment consultant who wants me to work for some nonprofit, which did something around entrepreneurship and which didn't really make sense to me. So I kind of tried to avoid the recruitment consult for as long as I could. He followed up with me for 3 months. Eventually, I thought I should be polite and give in. So he convinced me to fly down, meet this this nonprofit corporate headquarters, figure out what the job is about, and and see if I wanted. So that was my entry into the entrepreneurship space in 2011. I flew in, came back with a job offer. Um, that's pretty much what I've been doing, and I think this is what I love to do. Started off with consulting academic institutes on what kind of entrepreneurship programs to run, included training faculty, consulting the directors, setting up e-cells. Went on to build city-based ecosystems. So entrepreneurship was very new in India at that point of time. So helping people understand the concept of mentoring, doing capacity building for investors, did all of that, got invited by the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship to consult them on how can we replicate this entire model across India. So did that. And eventually decided to move to Canada in 2018. So that's the journey of India. Canada, I had my newcomer struggle again. People had difficulty in understanding my experience back in India. So I had a brief stint in working with a nonprofit that did mentoring for newcomers in terms of their career. Did that for 3 years. And then I got a break with York University YSpace as a program officer. I quickly got promoted to the manager position, spent a lot of time working on their women's entrepreneurship initiative. And right now, I've moved into the special projects position where I take care of a lot of short term funded projects that come to YSpace time to time. So I hope that was short and brief.
Love it. It's amazing. And you have such a diverse set of experience from so many different industries, which, allows you to be so insightful in, the programs that you run. So it's amazing. I should mention I was part of the Ella Sun program in 2022, and it definitely was life-changing for my career. So I highly recommend it. And Marlena was instrumental as part of this program as well. So I just want to say thank you again. And of course, let's talk about why you're so passionate about entrepreneurship.
So again, for me, I think for everyone, whatever they do in life, there has to be some excitement and they need to know their forte. I think when I got introduced to entrepreneurship, what I loved about it was the thrill of doing something different every day. When you are in the startup ecosystem, it's a small but mighty team usually. However, you don't know what challenges you're going to face every single day. So you're almost working like a startup. And I think I love that part because it keeps me on my toes. It keeps my brain cells thinking. That's what I love. What I also love is the pure energy and passion of working with startups. Like they are a different breed, they think different, they talk different. Every time they walk into the room, there's always so much to work on, so much to talk about. And I think that energy is very contagious, and I love that energy. And I think last but not the least, it's also a means to really contribute to the country's economy in terms of, job creation, increasing the GDP. And I feel the role here and within the startup space is much more satisfactory in that sense, because I can really define tangible impacts that have been created just through working with startups or defining programs for them.
Love it. Do you think anyone can be an entrepreneur?
Um, I would say there are two sides to that question. Given the right discipline, given the right mindset, given the right environment, anyone can be an entrepreneur. However, if I have to really define who should take up entrepreneurship as a career, it has to be someone who's very passionate about problem solving and has the ability to convert that into a viable business model. It also has to be someone who's extremely resilient. I don't think entrepreneurship is for people who give up in life pretty quickly, because there's never going to be a time in entrepreneurship where someone's going to sit back and say, hey, this is where, been there, done it. I've become an entrepreneur. It's a journey. It's a constant journey. There are going to be different set of challenges, roadblocks at every stage of the journey. So unless someone really has it in them to enjoy this journey and enjoy these challenges, it could be tough for other people.
I love it. What about the word flexibility or adaptability as an entrepreneur?
I think that should be one of the top traits that any entrepreneur could have, because it's very difficult to start off with an idea and presume that this is how the idea is going to be implemented, and this is exactly how my customer is going to perceive what I'm offering, and this is exactly what my customer is going to pay me. Plus, there are macroeconomic factors. So there's so many factors which will depend on external circumstances and situations. So unless there's a flexibility to understand and quickly adapt, it could become a source of failure.
Yeah, really interesting. What about scrappiness? So that's one of the adjectives I always use to describe me, is that I'm scrappy. And some people like sort of raise an eyebrow, like, scrappy, what does that mean? I bootstrap a lot of things. And maybe that's not, I'd love to hear your take. Maybe that's not like a scaling sort of mindset, but I think you need to be scrappy. And I think it's good to be scrappy all the time. But you tell me what you think.
I think absolutely. Like, you can define that word in so many ways, but an entrepreneur should definitely be scrappy. So, one of the first things I noticed with some entrepreneurs that I started working with, especially in the early stages, one of the first things they would do is, go and build a website. And my big question to them would be like, you don't even have a validated product or idea. Like, why are you investing money in the website? Right? I think it's so important to figure out, especially when you're an entrepreneur and you are very limited on funds, where are you potentially going to use those funds to bring you maximum value for your buck? What I've also noticed is startups seem to get lost in the concept of profit and loss versus cash flow, right? So on paper, they may think that, oh, I'm making so much money and this is what's coming. However, because of the invoicing cycles and the money coming in versus money being investment, there's always a gap in what's in the account at any given point of time. And if someone's not scrappy, it could lead into financial implications, because this is real. Like, there are bills to be paid, there's an office to be maintained, there are employees if you have to be paid. Like, where's all that money going to come from? So I strongly think that entrepreneurs should always think scrappy. However, they should also understand where they need to spend money, right? So at end of the day, like, the simple formula is, what is the return on investment? If I'm investing so much money, what do I expect to get out of it? And that will define how the cash flow or how the money is used in and out on daily basis for the business.
Makes sense. I love that. Let's talk about investors and investments and angel investors and all that stuff. What are your thoughts on that for business? When should someone seek that out? Let's talk about that.
First of all, I think investors have different investors have different investment styles, right? So some investors like to invest in the person himself or herself, the founder, right? Because they feel they may not be very sold on the idea, but they know that if it is this founder, they can expect that this founder is going to figure out a way. There are some investors who will primarily focus on the business model, the scalability of the solution, and take a call whether this is where they want to invest in it, right? So when do we actually decide we want investment or not will depend on multiple factors. One is what kind of business is an entrepreneur in. Usually, traditional product based businesses, service based businesses tend to not attract investors compared to tech products, definitely because of their potential to scale. So it's important to assess oneself from their perspective. I think the other area to assess would be what's the need for an investor, right? For example, if you're a product based business and there is a big order that has come in, uh, and a founder needs money for the production of goods, which will eventually be sold to a customer and money will come in times like this, it may make more sense to go the debt route because you know that you just need this money to produce goods and eventually the revenue is going to come in compared to giving a stake of your venture to an investor, which may not really be needed. So an investor is really needed when there is an established product with a very specific business model. The founder is able to demonstrate that this is the revenue I can generate. These are what my profit margins look like. If I get money for marketing and team, then this X amount that I have created in, let's say, 1 year of time, I can do 10X in 6 months. That's the time when potential investors are best to seek out, and they will see value in coming and at least hearing out what the startup has to say. So these are some of the larger factors that one should look at while looking for investors. And one thing that everyone should keep in mind, which can get lost in the fundraising journey, is anytime we bring in an investor on board, it means we are giving a part of our startup away, which means we're no longer the sole person making decisions around the startup, which we actually started with, right? This could be good and bad. If we find an investor who has knowledge around that domain, who also comes with the network, then definitely it's more helpful. However, if you just end up getting an investor who simply looks at this as a money-making game, it could be difficult to work with and it could hamper the long-term strategy of how a founder would want to take their startup ahead.
Mm, brilliant. Thanks for explaining that. That's super interesting. And what about if a company has an investor and sort of relying on the investor as opposed to making their own sales? What sort of advice would you give for that?
Um, I think investors are not going to participate in day-to-day operations. So it may not really make sense to just rely solely on an investor because end of the day, a founder is still they still own the startup. It is their baby, they know their vision, they know where to go with it. An investor can play an advisory role, make connects, but if a founder doesn't know how to leverage the investor's expertise, it can go haywire. So end of the day, the decision making, the planning, the strategic thinking, the vision should always rest with the founder and not with the investor.
Brilliant. And what sort of companies or entrepreneurs would you invest in? Or do you invest in through the programs and all the grants and the different things that you're involved with?
So for us, we don't directly invest in startups, but when it comes to recruiting people for the program, I think it has to be a combination of people who are driven for sure, who are very passionate about what they are doing, but also who are open to inputs that are coming to them from multiple people, right? I think that's one big red flag that I see with a lot of startups, and understandably so, because they're probably doing their own thing because that's what they like to do. But sometimes, if if there are people who are willing to help you and people who've been there, done that, why would you want to repeat a mistake that somebody else has already done? So for most programs, what we look at is coachability plus a passion to do what they are doing, as long as we get that. And of course, discipline and punctuality, because being a startup requires that. Like, you are your own boss and there's nobody really to back you up on what time you woke up, when did you start working. So if it is someone who takes up entrepreneurship just because they don't want to do a 9 to 5, it's not going to work, because entrepreneurship is so much more than 9 to 5. So these are some of the qualities that we look at, when we see people coming into our program.
Interesting. And have you ever thought about becoming an entrepreneur yourself?
Yes, being with entrepreneurs for so long, it's definitely something that I've always wanted to work on. But I do believe that I just don't want to do things because I want to do it. I really need to find an idea that I get excited about. And I think once that comes in, for sure I will go that route. But right now it's like the hunt is still on.
Do you think you need an MBA or you need to go to school to be an entrepreneur? Or do you think some people just have it innately? Or do you think you need that background?
I I personally feel we don't. I think an entrepreneur is usually, it's an innate quality. Like I said, it is a problem solving skill plus an ability to figure out how are you going to make money from the solution that you have come with. I don't think a business background is needed for that. However, I do believe that an MBA could help, because understanding of concepts of business, of what market frameworks look like, can help someone propel the journey faster just because they have that understanding. For someone who doesn't have a business exposure understanding, the time cycle of having those learning experiences built in could be slightly longer. But again, I think it is still very people dependent. I've known startups who have dropped out of universities and colleges and have built multi-billion empires. And I've known startups who come out from A-grade universities and have still struggled. So I don't think there's anything set in stone. In the end of the day, it's still the person who's deciding to launch his or her own startup.
Yeah, it makes sense. I totally agree. Absolutely. And what makes you most excited about getting up in the morning?
In the fact that there's something different to do today, that I'm going to work with entrepreneurs. I must make a mention of the YSpace team here as well. It's a fantastic team. We rub off our energies on each other, and there's always something different to do. So it never feels like work to me. It's more like I get paid for doing my hobby. Let's put it that way. So that's what I love about being in the startup ecosystem.
A pretty good hobby.
Thank you. As long as it pays well.
There you go, even better. Are there any entrepreneurs or brands or businesses out there that you really resonate with and, you're like, wow, these people are an amazing example of entrepreneurship, about taking risks, about doing things differently?
In fact, there are quite a few, but like, if I have to talk about the journey, I want to mention one, because that I happen to have known that startup right from its student days, and it's been such an interesting journey. The student, I started working with the student when he was in his third year of engineering at a university that I was consulting in India. And he was actually a student whom he was not a favorite of the faculty, because he would mostly be bunking classes and not going there because he was busy doing his own venture. So while on campus at that point of time, I think this is back in 2011, he started something called Google, which was supposed to be the mobile version of Google. So, and those time mobiles were not smartphones, they were not as high tech. So it's trying to figure out an option where people can just ask a question on a mobile and find solutions. So he worked on something like that. Obviously, it didn't work out, needed a lot of funds and technology. He quit that, and then, still didn't go to classes, started something else on campus. That was a place which was in India. Not a lot of people eat eggs, especially in that area. So he started a cafeteria which was focused on items made only from eggs so that the students who really wanted it could focus on that, tried that. That failed, and then somehow managed to pass out of university in 5 years instead of 4 years. The first job that he got as soon as he passed out of university was with a startup because of his startup experience. And it was a product based startup, which was a marketplace for fashion. He worked there, eventually launched his own business, his own startup after a couple of years with one of the co founders from the startup that he worked with. And this was focused at that point of time on data analytics based on content creation, which could be sold to different marketing people. That company became a multi-billion company, and till date, he deploys more than 100 people. So it's been a journey that I've been following, and it's been absolutely amazing to see how someone who's so resilient, someone who knows that driven and this is what I want to do, eventually things will happen.
Amazing. Before we move into the lightning round, I have one last question, which I think is really important to touch on, and you mentioned it. What's the importance of failure?
I think failure is very important, and which is why I strongly recommend anybody who is wanting to pursue a startup, start as soon as you can, because failure is inevitable. It's never going to be an option. It's always going to happen. But what how we treat failure is what is important. Like, do we let it drown us and think of it as a lifetime failure, or do we learn from it and do we incorporate that, pick up the pieces and start moving on? I think that's what matters end of the day. Failure is, as people say, it's the biggest teacher. So I think we should fail constantly so that we are constantly learning.
I absolutely agree. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, keep going. You have to, especially being an entrepreneur. Anything in life in general, actually. I want to make this just in general. It is like one of the most important things that you can do is to pick yourself up and keep going. And that's what life's about.
Exactly. It's so interesting how some of these principles of entrepreneurship can be so applicable into our personal lives as well. And sometimes I see that they're almost similar to each other. I don't see a difference in either of them.
I absolutely agree. All right, ready for the lightning round?
Yes.
Here we go. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. Whatever comes to your mind, let me know. All right. Comedy or thriller?
Thriller.
Really? Okay. Interesting. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
Okay, good stuff. Crunchy peanut butter or smooth?
Smooth.
Smooth. Would you rather be able to fly or breathe underwater?
Definitely fly.
Okay. You can travel 50 years into the future or 50 years into the past. Where are you going?
Always the future.
Makes sense. Where are you traveling to next?
The plan is to go to Punta Cana in April if things work out.
That's exciting. And I kind of asked this question, but what actually gets you up in the morning?
The Indian tea with cardamom and milk and water. That's what I get excited about first thing as soon as I wake up in the morning.
Sounds delicious. I'm ready for one. Favorite saying of all time?
Favorite thing of all time. Think the thing which stays with me forever is okay, this is not going to be a short answer. While growing up, I didn't travel much because my parents were very focused on academics and most of their vacation days were used during my exams. So I think the first real travel that I had was probably in my 11th grade, where we went to a beach. And that was my first experience of being at the beach. I remember sitting by the beach late at night, and it was only me and the ocean. And it was really thinking phenomenon for me as to who I am and where I'm moving forward in life. So that's been till date one of my favorite experiences so far.
Amazing. There's a piece of advice that you have to give to your 90-year-old self. What is it?
I would say believe in yourself, no matter what the world may do to put you down. You are special, you are unique, and keep pushing yourself forward.
And what are you doing at 90?
At 90, maybe playing with at least 10 different grandchildren.
Wow, you're going to be busy. Okay, I love it. How do you want to change the world?
I do feel one thing that the world really needs right now is empathy for everybody else. I think there's a lot of noise, and while people have good intentions, the stuff which is thrown at us in terms of social media, opinions, there's a lot which is thrown at us. And I think it's important to really empathize with anybody that we engage with or have a conversation with, or before we make a judgment or an opinion, to really understand the other person's perspective. I think if there was more empathy, the world would be so much a nicer place.
I agree with you. And last question, what's next?
So while I continue to do what I do and love at YSpace, I am exploring certain entrepreneurship options. So it's still under the wraps right now, but keep a lookout. You may see an entrepreneur coming out of me pretty soon.
Holy moly, am I excited. Woo, I can't wait for this one. Well, Marlina, it was such a thrill. I absolutely loved our conversation. You had so much insights and wisdom to offer about entrepreneurship. I hope that everyone will get the same that I got out of this conversation. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It takes a lot to it's most podcasts invite people who are celebrities, who've been there, done that. But I think, people like you and me, there's so much that we have to share, and the life that we have lived. So thank you for organizing platforms like this where people like me can come and share our stories and experiences. Thank
They're
you.
the best stories. And in my mind, Marlina, let's be clear, you are a celebrity.
Thank you.
The Maverick Makers Podcast is sponsored by Maverick Makers Content Creation Collective. We fuel your content pipeline through video, photography, design, and editorial. Let's connect to your audiences and make more sales. Learn more at maverickmakersco.com.